And, it will probably take a very long time before it becomes actually a real law. But if companies do publish ads for Black Friday or send emails, they will risk 2 years imprisonment and even a 300,000 euro fine. That's a pretty Black Friday.
Do you think is this a way forward to this?
I don't think so. No, I think, like you said, we have to become aware of the fact that it's so easy to consume. We buy a lot of stuff that we really don't need, or, new clothes every season. Whereas we can, maybe recycle stuff. I think it's all about creating awareness with the consumers.
Because it would be difficult to ban the idea of Black Friday.
Of course, and there will always be smart people who would transform it into a Red Wednesday or a Green Monday. It's typically French to think that if you make a law, then you will get rid of the problem. But of course, it doesn't work like this. But it's pretty serious. I'm not sure whether the Parliament will actually accept this law. But yeah, it's like we talked about Halloween a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Just one of those other American things.
Yeah.
And this, there's Black Friday now here to stay as well. So little by little, France is becoming a little bit more.
Make Black Friday green again.
Yeah, that's actually quite a nice slogan. And then sad news in Africa, in Mali to be more precise. A collision of 2 helicopters killed 13 French soldiers during a night operation. The mission was part of a broader military effort against Islamist radicals in the Sahel region. And the 2 helicopters of the type Tiger and a Cougar, they were providing assistance to ground forces who were engaged in the counterterrorism operation. That's a statement from the French Defense Ministry. And of course, President Emmanuel Macron expressed his greatest respect for the fallen soldiers and his total support for the French military. Now, these soldiers were busy in the Operation Barkhane, which is launched in 2013, I think. What is it exactly, this operation?
Well, it's a military operation that started in an attempt to push out jihadists in Mali, because there was this risk of jihadists actually reaching the capital of Bamako in 2013.
Yeah.
And that's when the Malian authorities actually called on France for help and said that, we can't deal with this. We don't have the manpower. We don't have the training, nor the equipment to actually push back this offensive. And the French president at the time was François Hollande. Yeah. He accepted this mission, as has French military many times before around the world in different operations. And since then, yes, the operation, it was first called Serval, and then is now called Barkhane. It's an operation that is supposed to actually, it's not only France, it's supposed to include military forces from all 5 Sahel countries that are spanning from Mauritania to Chad.
Yeah, it's just an area the size of Europe. It's really enormous, and it's almost all desert.
Absolutely. It's a big area. And, all countries are supposed to participate. Very few actually are. It's also supposed to be supported financially, from European countries, even from Saudi Arabia. Yeah. However, the Saudi Arabia money has never, actually been, sent off.
Okay.
You have European countries that are participating in training missions, for example, but no boots on the ground. So the actual fighting on the ground is done by French forces.
Yeah. And now it's really not very controversial in France, all these foreign operations.
No, they're not. And I think that in France, the whole the military is not something that people generally talk about. It's not. It's considered to be business of those who know more, or those at the top.
It's also like we are a big nation.
The French military might has always been.
Exactly. And actually, I looked this up. France is the most aggressive country in the history of the world. The country that started the most wars, also lost a lot of wars. So it's really part of the French identity. Yeah? And which is not quite the case in Europe. Of course, Germany has a very different history, and that's
some different experiences as well.
Yeah, of course, but they are very reluctant to send their soldiers into other countries now.
And they were by law prohibited from doing it until recently.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's also another issue. In France, the president can decide on his own. We go to war. In other countries, there's something very irritating that's called parliament.
Yes,
and so it takes a long time before parliament decides, and it's that's very annoying to a lot of French people, because they think, well, just send us troops, and that means that there's a little rift, of course, between the European countries and France, because the French now, they said it this week again, they more or less blame the other European member states that they are not doing enough, because the French say, well, this action Barkhane is also to protect Europe against jihadists, against terrorism. Of course, quite a few countries, they do participate, like currently Estonia, a very small country, but nevertheless they contribute to the forces, and also the United Kingdom, and previously Spain and the Netherlands and Denmark. But yeah, like we just said, most European countries, they have a different view on these interventions.
Well, you can say you have different views. You can also say that since there's someone else doing the job, you don't really have to be bothered, because
true.
there is one truth to this story, and that is that you have a jihadist offensive going on, and you have forces, you have jihadists that are, really threatening the local population, the authority of the governance in this whole region. And what many specialists are saying is that if we don't pay attention to this problem while it's in the Sahel, we will at one point see the problem in Europe as well, as we did when it came to the jihadist threat in Iraq and in Syria, for example. And if you see, yes, you say that in Syria and Iraq today, the Islamic State group is more or less defeated, even though, it hasn't disappeared, but it's more or less defeated for the time at least. But their their aim now is to regroup and put the emphasis in Africa. Yeah. So I think it's not to exaggerate to say that there is a real threat, but then of course the question is this Europe? Should it be Europe being on the ground and really leading these operations? That's another question. The problem is as well that many of these countries, it's poor governance. Yeah. You can't deny that in several, and poor countries in general. And then, so what do you do? It's a very difficult situation.
Absolutely. And it also comes at a time when there's a lot of debate about maybe a potential European army, something that Macron really would like to see. And of course, the role of the NATO. Can we still rely on NATO? And of course, next week there's a summit of the NATO, which Macron will also attend, although he will not stay very long because he will go back because the strike will start at that very day.
He better try to get home.
But it's all part of a larger debate on what to do with the European defense. And of course, France being probably the largest army, also an atomic power in the European Union, they really want to see more European collaboration.
And of course, it's a question of power. I mean, for France to remain an important player in Africa, which it shouldn't be, shouldn't be denied either. Of course, there is an interest from France to make sure that they are still important in that part of the world. So it's a complicated story. It's unfortunately a very sad story as well, because we're talking a lot about 13 dead French soldiers. Yeah. I think we have several hundred dead Malian forces over the last years. Yeah. So it's a very sad situation and quite a difficult and worrying situation as well.
Absolutely. Now, Sarah, this is all serious business we've been talking. I think it's time for a drink.
Yes.
Don't you think so? Yeah.
Well, we better hurry up.
Yeah, we better hurry up because in January, it may be dry January, so we won't be allowed to drink anymore. What's this story?
Well, dry January, I must say, I actually did dry January last year.
That's why you were so annoying at the beginning of this year. Now I remember.
It was the very first. It could have been my very last as well. I'm not making any promises for next year.
Did you like it? How was it?
I did. It was a challenge in the sense that it was just a challenge. And I don't know why. I'm not a heavy drinker, but, just socially,
Social,
especially here in France, it's not always, you're not used of going to places and then just say, well, I have some water.
Yeah, no, indeed.
But it was fun. Yeah, well, fun. It was okay. I survived. But this is a thing that has grown here in France, as everywhere in the Western world. I would say here in France, it's getting more and more people saying, I'm going to take a month without drinking alcohol, etc. And once again, it has gotten the authorities a little bit worried, but maybe not for the reason that you would think, right?
No, especially Emmanuel Macron. He doesn't like dry January at all.
No, maybe not. And, because there was a plan for a national campaign for dry January to raise awareness about, the risks of alcohol and overconsumption, etc. But this campaign has now been stopped in its tracks. Because
Emmanuel Macron likes a drink. He drinks at lunch, at the dinner, at least a glass of wine. That's what he says. So now people say, he is under the influence, not only of alcohol, but also of the lobby of the wine industry. Very powerful, of course. But then again, the French are amongst the heaviest drinkers of Europe. And then not necessarily binge drinkers, but they do drink much more than their neighbors, and more regularly, like you just mentioned, socially. So it's very accepted. It's very hard to say, no wine for me tonight. You really have to explain yourself. Huh? Yeah. Are you pregnant?
You've had that.
Yeah,
I got the question all the time.
And then I say, no, I just have a big belly. I'm not pregnant. Don't worry. But in 2017, 41,000 people died from alcohol-related causes. And there's a huge disparity between men and women. 11% of men in France die because of an alcohol-related cause. And compared to Italy, where they also like wine, that's only 3%. So it's really a big issue here in France.
So, there are several problems with the alcohol consumption here in France, because some, of course, as you said, are mentioning the fact that people are drinking too much and there are health issues with that. Others are worried for another reason, and that is actually that since the 1940s, the alcohol consumption here in France has halved.
Wow.
And of course, there are people who are worried about that because you have wine producers. France being one of the world's, of course, biggest wine producers. They are worried because they can't, sell off their bottles.
Absolutely.
The same thing anymore. And some are now saying that the reason why this campaign, Dry January, the official campaign from the French authorities, has been pushed back. It hasn't been completely
No.
forgotten.
There will be a dry.
They're saying that it's going to be they can't talk about the campaign until February. But, why it's been pushed back a little bit is because the influence of many MPs coming from regions where you have a big production of wine, and them in their, on their side being pushed by the producers to, make sure that they can sell their wine without having consumers that are feeling guilty for drinking in January and things like that. So, we'll see what happens to Dry January. Will it happen in February? We don't know.
We'll see about that. Well, let's open some bottles, Sarah, before it's too late. That wraps up this edition of So French. We hope you have enjoyed it. You can listen to us on all podcast platforms like iTunes, Spotify and TuneIn Radio. And we're also on Instagram. Our account is @SoFrenchNews. Please follow us.
And if you like French music, check out our free playlist on Spotify, which we update regularly. Just search for So French Music or click the link on our website. And if you would like to contact us, please mail us on news@sofrench.news.
And you can also listen to us on air on World Radio Paris, not only in Paris, but also at the Côte d'Azur, in Nice and Cannes. And So French is broadcast at 2:30 p.m. local time every Saturday and then rerun during the week.
We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode of So French.
We hope you'll join us then. Thanks for listening. Au revoir.